Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Not too much news when it comes to EVE Online in the last week, except of course that we have been under a DDoS attack for like pretty much the entire week, causing some problems. It in fact threw me out of the game at one point while I was exploring, and it can be rather frustrating. For now, I think we should just be patient, allow CCP the time they need in order to fix the problems basically, and well, try to enjoy the game when we go in. For me at the moment what's happening is I start a launcher, then I start an application of the game, and there I get a message that I can't reach the server. Now if I stay in the application and then press connect, I go through without any problem. So far I have been able to keep up with the skilling spree, so you can go out there, kill a few NPCs and get free skill points on a daily basis as well. That's basically what I've been doing, just focusing on the bare minimums because of the difficulties playing. So I've been doing my BPCs, my PI, then running the skilling spree, a little bit of fueling, and when I got the chance I actually jumped into some emerging conduits rather than exploring, because that's usually something that I do for a longer period of time. Let's take a look at the new Eden store as well while we're at it. Let's see here. We've got the new Blackfire steel skins for the Triglavian ships. I think that they look pretty cool, but what I like even more, stuff like the Serene How skin. So from the Serenity server you sometimes have some really unique looking skins, and I think some of these look really amazing. Look at the Hyperion Serene Mang skin. That is pretty cool looking. Let's go like that in fact. So you get the white at the front, then the black here, and then back there you get the bridge with the red. I think it looks really amazing. Some of these skins are really nice. You don't see any sales or anything like that up at the moment, but they did just bring back some really cool skins. Look at this Typhoon Absent Hero skin as well. I think that looks pretty cool. Same thing, right? Red, then white, and then some black throughout the entire thing. Yeah, really nice skins that basically have come over from, where the hell is the X? There it is. Have come over from the Chinese server. You know, if you want them, then you can definitely grab them at the moment. These are not up all the time, if I'm not mistaken. That means we get to move on to the market. Then let's get started with some plex and stuff, and that's gonna be at 250. Like that, and let's take a look here. You can already have seen from the ticker, of course, we're up just a little bit. Most sales in GTAG go for almost 3.5 million ISK. Buyers are just below 3.3 million ISK, and then the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs almost 3.4 million. And here you can see our little jump up. The averages are up above 3.25 million now. There's definitely some upwards pressure that is starting to show itself, and if you look at the 5-day moving average, I think that trend is being set. So it looks like January right here, the early part of January, will probably be the bottom for the plex market. As I've said, this is a little bit of a gamble on my part, but it's a general pattern that we see as we head towards FanFest. We usually do get higher prices for plex, so let's see if it works out or not. For now, the trend, I think, has started. Next up, we've got the multiple pilot train certificate. That one actually dipped down a little bit, volume spike, so this should be a little bit of a sale or something like that. It could also be the new packs. I only read that there's a bit of controversy around them, that they're not considered to be great value for the real life money that you pour into them, but it's definitely possible that there's a bit of a deal on the multiple pilot train certificates there as well. So a bit of a bump, not as big of course as what we saw here in June, July. That crashed the price from 2 to 1.5 billion ISK, but right now we're still hanging on at 1.5 billion ISK. The question is, are we still trying to absorb these volumes? Honestly, it's possible. You can clearly see that they're down by quite a bit, and here we get a little bit of a bump in the road. What is interesting though is today's daily average is actually substantially above the 1.5. So sellers are coming in at almost 1.6 billion, buyers are at below 1.5 billion, so we're still landing in the middle a little bit, and the question is, who wins out, who gets most sales? Is it the sellers, or do people dump these to the buy orders? That's really what's gonna determine the range here on the daily averages. But you can also also see the volumes down to less than 100 in the last couple of days. That is not great, and yeah, I still think that we might still be in for absorbing these volumes, at least partly. And then of course we have pressure on the price in general because Plex is so low. So if the trend is starting, it should be now. The upcoming weeks will be pretty damn interesting. After that, we have these skill extractors that of course follow Plex very closely. A very pronounced bottom here in the first part of January. Finally a little bit of a move up in the last week or so, from below 380 million on the averages to above that. Still sellers coming in at 380 million, buyers at 375 million, so these are definitely edging up as well, and this is all in the last 24 hours. So we go up to 382 to 383 once we get past these few sellers, and then we go pretty quickly actually to 390. And then we finally get to the Jita station, where we're selling at 392, which means that sometimes people just go to Jita, buy at 392 to create this little bump right here. Again, start of the trend, I believe so, but I could be completely wrong on that. Of course, if CCP does come out with some sales or things like that, then we might just go back down, or if the game or the market for some reason decides that nope, this is not worth the price, then we can see the same effect, of course. After that, we've got our injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that have another step down, back below 800 million on the average price. So in my opinion, a great opportunity to move back in on these 800 million for the sellers, 775 million for the buyers. Now some of these sellers are making it quite annoying. Quantity 1, look at that in the last 24 hours. No, I thought it was all competition. No, it's the same player that is selling for this very specific price. That does look conspicuously like some sort of dumping, which is kind of weird. To try and compete this closer and closer to 800 million ISK, and actually to try and get rid of them. Buyers though up to 776 million ISK as well in Jita station. That's a pretty narrow margin. This should really be bottom forming, and it is at a pretty low price. If you can grab some large scale injectors below 800 million ISK, look at the rest of the chart, potential up to 1 billion, and we don't really go that much below this. I think you're looking at a pretty good deal. These small scale injectors are showing that same pressure as well. Not yet at the 1 year low point, that was 160 in November, but it is definitely getting closer to that. 164 million for the sellers, and that's actually a big difference. Let's see if there's buyers that drive the price up in the player on trade hubs. No. So buyers at 141 million, that's a massive margin compared to the 25 million margin between the buyers and the sellers of the large scale injectors. Very unusual. In the last couple of weeks, something that is really noticeable, there is a difference in the between the large scale injector market and the small scale injector market. So you can see here the more jagged movement, actually a move up as well in early January for the large scale injectors, and then for the small scale injectors you get this straight path down to the lower price. So sure, the pressure on the price is pretty obvious in both markets, but the way they behave is different, which is kind of weird, because if I'm not mistaken, you just divide the large scale injectors into small scale injectors. So kind of weird to see this jagged move here for the large ones, and then this straight line down for the small scale injectors. After that, we still have the daily alpha injectors to look at. These went to another bottom on a volume increase, and I think we can also see that some investors bought, but only up to 40 million ISK. Sellers are at 41.5 million, buyers are at 36.5 million. I think people basically bought out stuff up to a certain price range, maybe 41 million or something like that, ready their investments. But it's true, it feels a little bit risky as well now. 1 to 3 months straight below 40 million on the average prices. Should you really still move in there? Has the market decided that daily alpha injectors just aren't worth it anymore? I always get caught by that, and yeah, it's one of the dangers, of course. Nobody wants to catch a falling knife, although here we can clearly see that it's not falling anymore. The market is just hesitating at this price range. And then we finally have the hypercores that are actually up in price, going up to 360,000 ISK on average. That's kind of weird, because in the player owned trade hubs they're at 41,000. So in JITA, 357, 358 in fact for the sellers. So a little bit of upwards pressure on the price of hypercores. There's two ways to look at it. Is this likely to be a lot of hypernet activity? I personally don't think so, although well, no, I think if I'm not mistaken that Gold Magnate was sold through contract. So I really think that it's basically less supply. People, don't use the hypernet that much. At least I don't use it at all. I don't actually know the numbers, of course, but my feeling is that why would you spend money buying hypercores when you can just buy plex? And that's what's happening here on that increase in price. So yeah, interesting week here. We'll see in the upcoming weeks and months if I'm right that this is bottom formation and that here plex showing that that first upswing breaking to that 3.25 million mark on the average price is the first sign, the catalyst that is going to start to drive everything up back again. Next up we have the mineral markets coming in at 11 minutes. Like that, let us start with titanium. That is basically on average going between 6 and 6.5 ISK. Again, not as good as a price from 6.5 to 7, which we had like last week or 10 days ago, but it's still a very respectable price for titanium. Sellers are coming in at 650, bit of competition, and the numbers 2 billion, 1 billion, another 2 billion down here. It is of course a bit of dumping that happens as well once we go above 6.5 ISK. That's all kind of normal. We've been in this position for a very long time, that we have too many minerals, so there's gonna be massive reserves out there. Buyers are at 617. And then outside of JITA, nope, they're still at that same price range, 617 for the buyers. So decently narrow margin, above 6 ISK by quite a bit for the buyers is gonna keep this in check, I think. And yeah, we're moving around the 6.5 barrier. Once it's above that, I would personally sell. Once it's below that, I would consider buying if, for instance, you're doing some industry at the moment. It looks like a good time, I think, to put up a buy order. Try to buy them as close to 6.2 as possible. It's gonna be one of the best deals in the last month that you can get. After that, we've got the pyrite market continuing its slow ascent. That is kind of weird, right? Pyrite, having suffered for so long, is now basically showing a very strong one-yearly performance, and it's still building on top of that, albeit very slowly. It is now edging towards that 5.5 ISK range. We started the year at 3.5 to 4 ISK, so that is definitely a pretty impressive change of pace for pyrite. 555 in fact for the sellers, 522 the buyers, edge up as well. Couple of buyers, including a 30 million unit one above 5 ISK, is going to again keep us in that upwards momentum. Very impressive. It's always very difficult, as I've said, to then decide that, all right, I should maybe invest in pyrite. But if you did so when we were holding on, and now I'm again going to I mean, this is speculation, so don't take this as gospel, but look at what plex is doing here in the last couple of months. Look at what these daily alpha injectors have been doing in the last couple of months, and then look at that where were we, pyrite chart here. Same thing, right? It feels really bad to move in on pyrite at 3.5 to 4 ISK when it's been going down for like years straight, and it's been in this difficult position for several months on end. But turns out now, like 10 months later, this was the right decision. Buy at 3.5 and sell at above 5 ISK. That's a very nice profit margin to make. So this isn't about trying not to catch a falling knife, but having the guts to move in at the right time when everyone is saying no, pyrite is really bad, it's worth like 3.5 ISK. That's when the savvy investors make their moves, and you can see that there's probably some volumes here that will have been investment, and these people probably made the right choice. They can now slowly unload these at a very nice profit without, of course, spooking the market too much. I think that's basically what's happening. It's pretty impressive to see. After that, we've got the Mexalon market that has had this fall dip down to 40 ISK, 60 ISK on average. Pretty damn good. We're slowly building our way back up here. This is, of course, the resource redistribution that CCP decided to start in December, where in 0.0 they took away quite a few sources of titanium. So titanium has a similar thing happening here, and Mexalon causing the price to increase again. Very good news for high-sec miners, because we can can still produce massive amounts of Mixelon. 55 ISK for the sellers and 53 ISK for the buyers does show pretty strong demand. And this is back in the reasonable range for sure. I would not hesitate to sell my Mixelon at this price. After that, we've got the Isogen market that is, well, perhaps at the tail end of where Pyrite started earlier in the year, struggling for years and years on end. 12.5 ISK as a 1-year low just in December. Then we do have a spurt up, I think, being dragged up by the Mixelon increase, by the Tritanium increase, by the Pyrite increase as well. I think Isogen made a bit of a move, but was completely overzealous in this, went up to 17.5 ISK on a single day, and then now we're working our way back down on further pressure from the oversupply situation. 14.22 for the sellers, 13.82 for the buyers. That means that you can pretty easily grab Isogen at 14 ISK. Outside of this fall slump, this has really been the low point for Isogen. It is, of course, for your consideration. It feels very risky to move in on Isogen at 14 ISK, but if Pyrite is any indication, and all the others actually also show a bit of an uptrend, this could be the gamble to take as well. Isogen is like one of the worst performing minerals for the volumes that they get compared to everything else. Mixelon, for instance, should be less expensive than Isogen, considering volumes that you get out of the ores. And as a result, if CCP does intervene further in the resource distribution, they might look at Isogen and say we should really value that higher. And that could be a massive gamble then, but it could also be a very rewarding one if you buy it at 14 ISK. It's well, I myself don't buy, I basically hoard. That means that whatever I mine, produce and refine, I just put it in a bin and say I'm gonna wait for better times. And that's for instance what right now I would do with Isogen, and I would no longer do that with Mixelon, I would no longer do that with Tritanium, I would turn that into ISK. We still have Noxium to go as well, that is in a similar position. Oh no, alright. Nice move up here. So that fall slump here is a real thing, and Noxium just didn't have what it takes to crawl out of that until apparently last week, as we're suddenly really breaking the trend. We were staying below 250 for most of the time. Now we just break straight through that above 275. Sellers are in fact at 283 ISK all of a sudden, 260 for the buyers, lagging behind a little bit, but definitely forced up as well. The comeback for Noxium is here. Very interesting. So again, here in the last couple of months, whatever I found for Noxium, I would not have sold that. I've been hoarding that. You can already start to consider getting that sale back up, because it's back to a respectable price range, 282. It is around here on the chart, the low points of what we had about a year ago. It's not that bad overall. Nice recovery all of a sudden. Came out of the blue for me. I was expecting to say I'm still holding my Noxium as well. I might start to slowly unload that here as well. And that basically for the real high-sec minerals, or the former high-sec minerals, the stuff that generally gets mined in any belt in high-sec. Alright, there's definitely Noxium sources that are tied to different regions, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. Only Isogen is really still doing very, very badly. I agree, it is a gamble, and I never feel good about gambling, but part of me is saying perhaps I should make sure that I've got a decent amount of Isogen ready at around 14 ISK and see what happens in 6 months, a year from now, when CCP has gone through all of their resource changes in EVE Online. It could be massive. I'm saying could here, not will. Of course, it's a bit of a gamble. Then we have our former Nostic minerals. Here is Zydrine landing back at that 500 ISK. That's really its price apparently. 517 for the sellers, 473 for the buyers, and it's that typical pattern: 4 million, 2 million, 3.5 million, 2 million. You know, these are the volumes that are mined on a regular basis by high-sec sources now. That's completely changed the dynamic, crashed the price. This stuff used to be worth like 1100 and 900 ISK and stuff like that. But it's apparently found its range. 500 ISK for Zydrine is where the market tends to start to compete, sometimes a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower. And then we have a Megasite that's actually in a different pattern, a 1 year of straight downwards pressure from 500 ISK down to the 350 range. Where will it stop? very difficult to say, but we do see some jitters all of a sudden. Sellers back up to 379 ISK, buyers are still at 340, they're staying on their below 350 line, trying to get that cheap megasite, and these guys might again also be right, because now Zydrine is starting to at least find its trade range, whereas megasite is still going down, and historically speaking, megasite has always been more expensive than Zydrine. So there's really two minerals that stand out in being in a weird spot, in a reverse situation, where historically speaking they've always been worth more than what they're at right now, and that would be megasite and it would be isogen. So if you can grab that megasite at less than 350 ISK, you're already buying pretty much below the entire chart, except for this one little dip down here in December. And right now you're basically getting another opportunity as pressure mounts again on the megasite market. It's pretty fascinating stuff. It feels really risky, but if pyrite shows us the way, then it could also be pretty damn big. And then we still have more fights to look at, and this one is going for another high point, probably 13,500 ISK or something like that. A great price, and of course I say it pretty much every week, but more fight is different because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy, and if I'm not mistaken, you can't just mine that from a moon in the 0.5 system. So this one is still in the good old 0-0 mineral mechanic, where these sellers need to be imported into JITA, and so they get to dominate the price. 13,400 ISK for the sellers, 11,500 ISK for the buyers. You can see this massive margin between buyers and sellers. This is really trying to catch the lazy people that just dump their morphite, but it's very difficult to do so because the average price 13,400, let's see if I can show that, is right on the money for the last couple of days. So it's really the sellers that are dominating the price of morphite here. These are very opportunistic buy orders, but it's very difficult to get any of those to trigger. It's really all about production, bringing that to the market and being able to demand the price that you want for morphite. It's a reality here because of course it is not mined everywhere like all the other minerals basically are now. That means we get to move on to the PI market, coming in at 22.20. Like that, and let's take a look here. Last week I saw some signs of recovery, us moving back on the averages. For the advanced PI materials we actually had some pretty strong performances, and the broadcast nodes again, they were like above 2 million for most of the time. Now we're dipping back below that, but they did really well and they're basically on their average. I should really show the buy orders in the player owned trade hubs for this as well. Almost 2.1 million for the sellers and 1.9 million for the buyers. This is a very narrow margin between the two, and we're basically on that 2 million average. Right now we're a bit below that, which means that some people are dumping a little bit to these buyers, but overall this is a very surprisingly stable situation for something that is tied to structure production. So the real question is, do you expect FanFest to have an announcement around structures, maybe a new structure, something for a 0-0? It all depends on the quadrants, of course. But if you don't, this shows that there's pretty stable production. Destruction, I don't know. Perhaps with the kicking over castles update, that there is a bit more destruction out there, but from my perspective here, this looks like we've got a pretty stable situation going on when it comes to the production of structures and the demand for advanced PI materials, at least in the broadcast nodes. Next up, we've got the construction blocks, and this is what I was talking about when it comes to that recovery. You can clearly see October, November, December well below average. 10,000 ISK and below was not really great. 11k should be the average, and finally here in the last couple of weeks we managed to make our way back above average on the prices. Now we have to pay the piper at some point. We're already back down. In fact, we're down to 9,900 for one seller, most are at 11,000, and buyers are still below 10,000 ISK. I think what's happening here is for the first time in like 3 to 4 months we went above average on the sales, and this will have triggered quite a few people to dump their stocks as well, because the opportunity to finally sell above average was there, and I think that's what's happening on this correction. Now hopefully demand can stay strong enough, and here this looks like there's at least decent competition even up to the 9,900 part. So if demand can stay up, I think we can bounce back to those 11,000 averages decently quickly. Consumer electronics was still not recovering, and yeah, this is a sign in the completely different direction. Jesus, averages now to 10,000 disc, normal price 12 to 13,000, and this is a leg down to the 1 year low point for consumer electronics. Quite a bit of a surprise. Look at the volumes here, must be even more dumping that's happening here. 10,500 discs for the sellers, 9,620 for the buyers. This looks like something that I would risk a buy order on if you look at what's happening here. 1 year low point and the potential up to 13k is very easily there, so that's a 30% profit on these buy orders pretty damn easily. I would dare to risk that. Next up, we've got the coolant market that did really well actually to stay 12 to 13,000 disc. Here also in the last couple of days, the average goes all of a sudden down to 12,000 disc. We're talking 12,200 from the sellers, 11,200 from the buyers. It's still a respectable price, and 12k is quite okay, but it's pretty obvious that supply has come in and has driven the price down substantially all of a sudden. Cryoprotectant solutions. This one is of course an odd one out because it is tied to the production of the new implants for the triglavian weapon system, so you're bound to get some volatility and some counter trendy moves here, which is of course jumps up to 180,000 ISK, and then the corrections of course as things slow down. This is usually the cycle that we see when CCP comes out with a new set of implants that require cryoprotectant solutions. Right now we're still at 150,000 for the sellers, 100,000 for the buyers. Pretty wide margin, right? Half the buy price. That's quite significant. But overall, of course, this is a bit of CCP intervention behavior, you could say, that can be very profitable, of course. If you produce cryoprotectant solutions, just have the patience of a sell order and you're selling at a really nice margin. Enriched uranium next, pretty flat at 14,000, so that looks pretty much on the average, but must also be said, last couple of days, 5-day moving average, definitely a move down, and these averages here at 13,000 disc don't look too great. Still, it's 14,300 for the sellers, so that's quite good. It's the buyers, 12,500, that are at a very low margin right here, putting some pressure on the price. Again, I thought we would have our correction back up, I would say, the end of that lack of demand finally be confirmed, but nope, for this week it's definitely more pressure on the market. Integrity response drones are staying below 2.5 million, but doing pretty well, I would say, to defend their average here as well. Almost 2.5 for the sellers, 2.4 million for the first buyer. Most are a bit below that. This is quite okay, again showing that pretty stable situation. Mechanical parts, more pressure in the PI market. Normal price range 11,500. I would say this is really easy to produce on barren planets, and we did well to come back here and to defend that 11,000 range, but yep, to no avail right here, down to 10,000 disc on average. So we're talking 10,500 for the sellers, 9,600 for the buyers, and it is a lot of supply that has come in the last couple of days, driving the price back down from 11,500, the normal average price, and then very quickly in just a couple of days we are down to 10,500 discs. So it is more supply coming online without the demand really being able to pick up the slack. That is causing pressure apparently across almost all refined PI materials. Organic mortar applicators flat on its 1 million range. You could say that that's a bit below average, but again it does show stability in the last couple of months. 1 million for the sellers, 940,000 for the buyers, yeah, around a million. So there's not too much to say there. Robotics is staying below average. 90 to 95,000 is not that great, but it's not a disaster either. 93,000 for the sellers, 90,000 for the buyers. Well, it's below average. It's your decision to make if you can grab it at 90k. Historically speaking, that's actually a pretty good price, but the volatility just hasn't been there. 90,000 to 110,000 if you're lucky, buying at the very best price and selling at the very best price. It's not that big of a margin. Self-harmonizing power cores next, not as stable, a couple of peaks up to 2.4 million ISK, but on average 2 million, and I think we're right there, just above that for the sellers, just below that for the buyers. Yeah, again, really stable situation in general in the advanced PI materials. The superconductors slumped down to 9,000 ISK as well last week, finally bumping back up, but 12k should be the normal average, and we're still not there. 11,500 for the sellers, 9,900 for the buyers, still pretty big margin. And yeah, any new supply at the moment is crushing these PI prices. Test cultures, 10,000 ISK, managing to maintain this price range, 10,000 for first seller, but most are at 11 to 70. Buyers are coming in at 10,000 ISK. Keep one thing in mind, this is also refined PI material. Most go for 12,000, sometimes even 14,000 ISK. So this is a nice recovery from test cultures, but it is still one of the cheapest refined PI materials at the moment. And then finally we get the wetware mainframes showing some volatility to the high side. At the tail end here, normal price 2.1 million, right now selling for 2.3 to 2.35 million, and buyers have been forced up to 2.2 million. So there is one exception right here in the advanced PI materials, and basically in PI in general. Looks like there's a lot of demand for wetware mainframes and not enough supply, but everything else is basically being supplied down to lower price ranges in the last week. Interesting, I did not expect that, but it is what is happening. Next up, the advanced moon materials coming in at 3105. Let's see what's happening in these markets, and this time we'll try to start with the right ones. Here are the carbonized crystalline carbonides tied to Galente ship production up to 170, 1 year high point. Pretty cool. 169 for the sellers, 156 for the buyers. Bit of a trend break all of a sudden, and you can clearly see that there was some volatility in the market in the last couple of months, and now finally we get a breakthrough on the high side. I think that's very welcome. Of course, if anyone that managed to buy at like 140, which you got plenty of opportunities at, you can now sell at a decent profit. Next up, we get the Fernite carbide tied to the Minmatar ship production, also up in price, staying at above 140, which you could say is close to its average. 145 for the sellers, 138 for the buyers. Definitely forced up. It's not the best sell opportunity, but it shows that there is decently strong demand here all of a sudden. Definitely a move, or well, I'm saying strong demand. What could also be happening is, of course, that it does dive down to that 130 range, and that you get speculators that move in and drive the price back up to that 140 range. That is possible as well. It's not necessarily demand, to be honest, but yeah, rapid fire Minmatar ships could be up a little bit in demand, so this could just help that move. Then we get titanium carbide tied to Caldari ship production. Much more stable situation at 175, which is actually, I would say, below average if you look at the entire chart. On the other hand, sellers are above 180 ISK, buyers are at that 175 range. It's basically a slow market right now that is below its average. It is tied to Caldari. Not sure if you got many updates on those. Those tend to already be the most popular ships, of course. Then we get tungsten carbide for Amar, and these are also not doing that great. Landing on 175, sellers are in fact at 174, buyers are at 169. Complete reverse situation compared to the Galente and the Minmatar that are up in price, and then we get Caldari for tungsten carbide, titanium, excuse me, and Amar that are down in price to below average price. In fact, you know, tungsten carbide, and then we buy for 169 below 170. That almost looks like a pretty good deal to try and step in on it. Then we have our metamaterials. Let's see if there's an impact there. Photonic metamaterials, that is very counter, right? This is high and then this is low. 1 year low point, in fact, currently selling for 15,200 ISK, buyers at 14,900. You can grab photonic metamaterials for less than 15,000 ISK. It's of course your decision to make, but this is clearly a 1 year low point on the chart. Plasmonic metamaterials actually doing a bit better, right? Did see a low point in December of 17,500 ISK. We're well away from that. 22,000 almost for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. That's a more respectable price and definitely in line with the upswing in Fernite carbide. And then we've got the non-linear metamaterials that are staying below average right now. In fact, in the last couple of days, below 22,500. Sellers still at 24,000, buyers at 20,000. That to me is very interesting. If we look for 20k on the chart, it's pretty much the low point, and this average going down right here with sellers still at almost 24,000 means that people are selling to these buyers. That does mean that you can grab non-linear metamaterials for close to 20,000 ISK right now, which is not that bad on this chart. And again, Caldari, ship production, Tech 2 stuff does seem to be in a bit of a slumber at the moment. I wouldn't call it a slump, but I would definitely say it's in a slumber right now. And it could be interesting for later, of course. Then we have our terahertz metamaterials that are also staying below average. Yeah, a MAR. I think that it, Minmatar is the least popular, but those got the rapid fire review. So right now, it could definitely be that a MAR is a bit out of the meta. 21,200 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. I mean, it's not the 1 year low point just yet, but it is clearly trading below average as well. We still have some other advanced materials to look at. Here is fermion condensate, still below average. The 1 year trend is try to stay at around 100,000 ISK. We're now below 90,000, so that's definitely not great. Ferrogel also below average right now, but not at a 1 year low point. That was right here in December with that dip, so still not recovered back to that 50,000 ISK range. Fullerite, ooh, finally an interesting move. 1,000 ISK for like most of the year, then we break down towards 900 ISK right here in the last couple of months, but finally a move back up here, 1,100 ISK for the sellers and above 1,000 for the buyers. If you bought on the real dips for Fullerite, you've got a sell opportunity right now. An unexpected move, but definitely a welcome one, I think. Hypersynaptic fibers flat at 12,500 ISK. Not that much to say, except that, well, it's one of the exceptions that's managing to maintain a slightly above average price. Nanotransistors, I think we know this story by now. Super strong summer on complete lack of supply at 6,000 ISK. Right now the averages are 5,500 as we're slowly making our way back to normal supply numbers, and it should be 5,000 ISK, so we're still actually above average for nanotransistors. Phenolic composites next, flat at 2,125. That's quite okay as well, not too much of a move here and slightly above average. And then ceramic fibers is around its average, I would say. Oops, what the hell did I click away? Not sure. Market data 428 for the sellers, 427, and then 390 for most buyers. It's basically a bit of pressure that is mounting, slightly below average, but still pretty respectable for our ceramic fibers. So advanced materials, well, we're seeing a difference in the Galente Minmatar categories, where we get this weird difference within the Galente segment as well. One is up, one is down to 1 year low point, and then Amar seems to be the one that's struggling most. And then the Caldari story right there, I think, is a slumber. It is below average, but it's still pretty stable. So let's see if that is reflected in the Tech 2 ships. If you would then expect volatility, I personally would say Galente ships and Minmatar ships could see most of it. So let's move on to that category, and that is at 37.55. Let's get started here with the Aries. That is definitely showing some volatility, went up to 35 million and is now working its way back down. The very low point seems to be once you're below 25 million ISK, 27 million for the sellers and still 25 million for the buyers. We're basically still recovering from the spike. Look at the volumes here, 500 units, another 200 units right here. That is going to keep prices in check normally. If buyers manage to go low enough, then you could of course try to have another good deal. Next up, we've got the Basilisk. That's a little bit more stable right here, around 230 million ISK. 233 for the sellers and 206 for the buyers. Very low point, gets close to 180, definitely below 200 before I make a move on this one. So that Caldari stability is showing right here in the Basilisk, right on its average. After that, we've got the Cerberus. That is not showing that stability, but I did notice this low point, so that's one trade that I made, although only at 50% of the potential profits. Again, low point 200 million. You can definitely grab Cerberus for I think that's the or is it Cerberuses? I'm not sure. Anyways, you could buy these Cerberus once it reaches 200 million on the buy orders, and look at the volatility, the potential up to 300 million not that long ago. Right now we are recovering from that as well. It's still 250 million for the sellers. That's where I bought my profit at, and then the buyers are at 223, which is of course still way too high to move back in the market. And let's see if I can show you guys the numbers. Was it here? Yeah, I bought the Cerberus for 195. As I said, 200 million, pretty important trigger. And then I sold a little bit too early at 249, but that's still a pretty nice profit margin on the 195 purchase. I would say 25%, just like that. And this was done within, I want to say a week. It's definitely less than 2 weeks, so that's a pretty nice turnover on this increase. So basically I sold at this point, should have waited a little bit longer, but I'm pretty happy with this trade myself. After that we've got the Crow, decently flat. We do want to see lower buy price, I think, before we make a move on that. And well, 25.2 million, it is not that bad. The problem is we still have 354 right here at the 28.6 million, so I'm actually convinced that more pressure can be shown before we need to buy these Crows. After that we've got the Guardian. Yeah, Amar, a bit more struggling as well, so this one is now diving below average, but also showing a bit more stability in my opinion. Again, 200 million, a bit below that is the trigger. Right now selling for 215, buyers are at 197, if I'm not mistaken. I have a Guardian trade that I made. Yep, it's right here as well. Bought for 180, sold for 239. That gives you a little bit of an idea as to what I'm looking for before I jump in on a buy order. And yeah, to be honest, Guardians at 197, that's definitely still too early considering the trade that I managed to make here. And that would be a 60 million on 180 million buy. So that's an easy 30% profit as well. I'm really happy with that one. And if I'm not mistaken, this was a longer turnover. I think I bought that one in October and then actually waited for this increase in price before my sale triggered, but it does happen, and the Tech 2 ship market is full of opportunities. Oh yeah, I also changed a little bit of some things on advice from you guys, because we removed a couple of really stable, in my opinion, uninteresting Tech 2 ships, and one of them is right here, the Hawk. The comment said that I should definitely take a look at it because it is super popular for the Abyssal Dead Space content, and that potentially you've got some very nice demand and maybe even volatility. And well, it was apparently right on the money. Look at what's happening right now. We were very stable for like almost 2 months at 35 million ISK, and now these are selling for 59 million ISK, 40 million for the buyers. Am I missing something? Did something like change? Because that does look like a CCP spike, to be honest. But this is great if you've got Hawks lying around that you bought for 35 million. Perhaps you have like a small fleet ready for your Abyssal Dead Space adventures. Well, you can make a pretty massive profit on that one right now. So whoever considered the Hawk, thank you very much, because this market does look like it's about to be alive, and that creates opportunities, of course. After that, we've got the Heretic, still taking a look at these interdictors, despite the fact that it's really abysmal in volumes. It's crawling its way back to 70 million on average on a lack of supply, 76 million for the sellers, and the buyers still at 51 million. These guys are just not budging. And so what tends to happen is basically, all right, supply is completely drying up. Those are getting back towards that 80 million range, and then there's people saying, oh, all right, finally I can get a couple of Heretics on the market, and just like maybe a dozen of them, then slowly, you know, it takes so much time to absorb all of that, and then we go back down to that average price of like 60 million ISK. That is because there's more supply, and then people say, all right, you know what, it's not worth selling anymore, so supply dries up again, price goes back up. This is a very, very slow move in a market that is lacking the volumes. I personally am keeping an eye on that, because I do think interdictors are actually important, powerful and useful ships, and I think at some point maybe CCP is gonna make a move on them. So I do, from time to time, when we see these slumps as well, that oversupply situation, try to grab them at those really cheap prices. It's never really been, I've never really been successful. I do think I've got a couple savers, but Yeah, I am trying to take that CCP gamble at some point. I've got the long horizon, that's why I'm keeping these. Stuff like the Hound, of course, is right there for that volatility. I think over the last 6 months or so, I've made 3 Hound trades or something like that. Very successful, also very noticeable, of course. Once you go below 25 million, start looking for the buy opportunities, and the volatility goes up to 35 million pretty easily. 40 million at the start of the year, 35 million at the later parts of the year. But that buy for 25, sell for 35, and in fact buy for 18, if I'm not mistaken, is stuff that I've seen for the Hound. Yeah, it's full of potential, and right now we're again recovering from a high point. Still 30 million for the sellers, 0.5 million for the buyers. Right now, of course, you could still sell if you bought at those really low prices, but to make a buy price right now is very difficult, of course. The Ishtar last week saw some pressure, and well, it's landing on 230, so I'm not seeing the bottom fall off right now. 225 million for the sellers. Well, that's dangerous actually, because the chart is still showing us 230, but the sellers have come in down to 225 and buyers are down to 208 million ISK. 200 is right here. If this pressure continues, perhaps we'll see a buy opportunity in the Ishtar. It's still a bit too early for me personally though. Manticore working its way back up to 30 million ISK. This first part here, that's the volatility that we love. Must be said that we dropped to really low points right here, where I also made a couple of trades, and we don't see the volatility go back to 35-40 million ISK, but you can still make ISK in the Manticore as well. It's 30 million for the sellers and less than 25 million for the buyers. That's actually a really wide margin. It is for your consideration. Keep one thing in mind. If I'm not mistaken, I've got this in trades made. Let's look at Manticore. I once made a trade for 28 to 33.9. And then where is Manticore? No. I'm really pretty sure that I bought this for 22 million as well. So just keep in mind for the Manticore, it really looks like we've gone down in range, and that the low points have to be sought closer to 20 million rather than below 30, which it was in the first half of the year. Then the Munin, very nice comeback after the fall, making its way back to a high point of 280 million ISK. It's already back down to 247. Ooh, that does get squashed very quickly. Look at that, 284, 258, 249, 247. And that in the space of 12 hours or something like that. Okay, pure Munin, this is going to go back down very quickly. As I've said, you know, sell opportunities do get spotted sometimes very quickly. So this one is being squashed as we speak, going back to that 250 and even below that 240 plus range. So we're back to a slightly below average Munin already, despite the chart showing us an opportunity. The Nemesis, that's pretty good in volatility as well. Right now staying above 25 million, 27 for the sellers and almost 25 million for the buyers. Yeah, again, here the low points play with 20 million. So that's what I'll be looking for another jump in on the Nemesis. The Oneros, a little bit of a move back up. I say it almost every week as well. I don't like the Oneros because of the lack of volumes here, but it does show potential as well. Maybe one at a time is something you can do. 219 million for the sellers, 195 for the buyers. This was like at 177 and things like that. So the good times here for the buy prices are over. We get a bit of a spike. We get a small sell opportunity in the Oneros, but I think you can feel just from this to 111.11. Yeah, the volumes aren't there. It's very difficult to actually make those trades happen in the Oneros market because of the volumes. Purifiers, 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes. Very awesome first half of the year, then a real crash down to 25 million, but another spike at 40, so that market is still alive. Right now we're still in the in between place, I think. Yeah, above 25 million for the buyers, 28 million for the sellers. It's still too early, I would say, to be sure of that awesome trade, so I would wait. Then we get the Saber, that's actually going back down in price, 62.5 million, one year low point on the chart, 63 million for the sellers. That's exactly what I was talking about, 61 million for the buyers. I've grabbed a couple of Sabers, if I'm not mistaken, very close to that range, but where is the difference? Heretic, this is the supply, so we actually have a high point, and then the Saber, this is the supply. And as a result, right now at a 1 year low point, all you can expect is that people are gonna say, why the hell would I make Sabers? right now for 63 million. Oh yeah, because it's completely different materials, I understand that, but if you have like a limit in your slots, then you would definitely switch from sabers to heretics right now. So my expectation is that since we saw this move up here as well, that the saber is just gonna stop with its supply, as price will slowly move back up, and then we might see a bit more production in the heretic that will then start to move back down. It's an unfortunate situation because those buyers at 61 million and those buyers at 51 million, they haven't budged for like pretty much a year, which is kind of crazy. Next up, we still have the scimitar to go. That one is also, you know, landing slightly below average, but still staying above 200 million on average. 210 million for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Here again, that real buy opportunity at 180 is over. And then finally, another request here to take a look at the Zarmas, because it is a logistics cruisers, and I actually really agree with that. They potentially are pretty damn awesome, and right now they're actually trading at less than 300 million ISK on average, which is a pretty real low point. 312 for the sellers, 275 for the buyers. The one difference, of course, this is a Triglavian ship. So if I take a look here and then go to industry normally, industry, what do we have? We've got, let this look, stuff like this. Yeah, it's produced in the Triglavian content, so it's not the exact same Tick 2 economy as the other ships, which of course make its dynamic quite a bit different. On the other hand, one thing to note, of course, is that well, our emerging conduits have been nerfed. This one is at a 1-year low point. These prices could go up because of the nerf. If you can run quite a few less conduits in the same time that you could before, that should mean a drop in supply, should mean an increased price. This could be an interesting place to try and grab some Zarmasts for less than, let's say, 280 million. I think that could be a good investment. It is gambling, of course, on the conduit nerf having a massive impact on the price of some of these raw materials, but we're gonna keep an eye on this one as well. I kind of like the logistics cruisers, and I think it's good to have a Triglavian ship in there just to feel the vibe of that one as well, because right now, of course, they're new, they're awesome looking, they get hyped up quite often, but we all know that at the moment they're also slightly overpowered, and eventually I think CCP will have to bring up the nerf bat. But yeah, that is the cycle in game content. Of course, stuff does tend to be too good at first because they want people to use the new content, the new ships and things like that. And like with the conduit, at some point, of course, it becomes a problem. That's when the nerf bat comes out and gets hit, and of course, yeah, Triglavian ships could see that as well. After that, we have the Tick 3 ships coming in at 5220. Let's take a look at those. Last week we finally said that we're back in a healthy tactical destroyer market, not oversupplied like what we saw in November, December, pretty much slumping the price down to an opportunity. Right now 38 million for the Confessor, 34 million for the buyers of the Confessors. Latest sell orders, these are really the volumes you want to see, below 10. Then right here you get a bit more supply in the numbers, but keep one thing in mind. The Confessor is still well below 40 million ISK, so still slightly oversupplied. The new supply is very hesitant. You can clearly see that. Lost 2 days, 2.5, 2.18. That's really not the volumes. This shows a bit of hesitation, and they're actually managing to bring the sell prices up to 38 million ISK, so that's going to go to that higher end as well. I think that's kind of normal for the cheapest Tick 3 destroyer. Next up here we get the Hecate. That's actually landing on 40 million right now. 41 million for the sellers, 37.7 million for the buyers, and this is where the supply is, of course, lost 24 hours. You've got more of them coming in the last couple of days. Quite a bit of competition. They're not crashing the price down just yet, but you know, why would you make Confessors when you can that are selling at 38 million when you can make Hecates that are selling at 41 million? So this, in my opinion, is not a sign of oversupply, but it's actually a move that is going to naturally bring the price of the Hecates closer to the Confessor, and that's kind of normal. The Jackdaw was at 40 million and it's basically staying pretty flat at that range, and look at that, we're not really seeing too too much stuff here. Maybe consolidation down here for those 108, but supply wise I think it's hard to call this oversupplied. I'll take a quick look at the player on trade hubs. Is that what's happening? No, it's not. So this is basically 41 million still for the Jackdaw. I think if I have to give one the edge in price and in demand, in usefulness, then it's gonna be the Jackdaw, because it is a missile ship, of course, with that potentially really a strong tank for its size, speed as well, super versatile. I really love the Jackdaw myself, so I would say that it is kind of normal. That 41 million is actually not unusual for the Jackdaw, and 41 million for the Hecate compared to that is actually seen as a real opportunity to get a bit more out of it. So as a result, Jackdaw definitely not oversupplied and still able to command that slightly higher price on the sell side of things. And then finally we've got the Zwepel for the destroyers. That was also making its way at 40 million ISK, and here last 24 hours, half a page, 20, 12, 15, the rest are below 10. Nothing too special here. 41 million for the sellers, but 32 million for the buyers, getting that to that 40 or slightly below 40 million average. It is the least popular one. I think we can clearly see that there's still a bit of margin in the Hecate, and that is being squeezed out by the supply, but the result is we don't see that many Confessor able to slowly go up in price. This is that normal tactical destroyer market that I was talking about, so don't expect massive deals or anything like that unless we get a sudden supply spike. Right now this feels like we're gonna get to that 40 million on average for all of these destroyers, and the subtle changes in supply demand will show up in the price, in production, but I don't expect anything outlandish here. For the cruisers, things could be different. We have the Legion that is still around 150 and struggling to get out of that impasse. 144 in fact for the latest sellers, 143 for the buyers. Try to get that, something like that on the chart. It's going to be down here. Still not at a low point, but it is definitely quite below average. If you want you know, a Legion, I think it's the right time to buy it. The Loki was commanding a higher than average price, almost 200 million ISK, is stepping away from that just a little bit. 192 for the sellers, 180 for the buyers. Definitely the strongest performer. Then we get the Proteus that is slumping down to 130. That's pretty interesting in my book. 130 million, 131 almost for the sellers, 122 million for the buyers of the Proteus. Upswing potential 170, 1 year low point. We're very close to that, 120 right here for the buyers. Yeah, if I'd want to buy some Tech 3 cruisers and take the gamble, this feels quite a bit more gambly than the destroyer market. That's easier to read. Then yeah, buy a Proteus for as close to 122 as possible, and try to wait for the right time to sell. And like finally we've got Tengu as well, that is slumping down. 140 is the low point, 155 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. Yeah, I would say if you feel risky, it always felt like a bit of a risk, especially here in the Tengu for instance. I mean, actually full 24 hours, a full front page, that's quite a lot of supply, so this slump actually makes sense. Let's take a quick look at the Proteus here as well. No, look at that, 4 new buyers in sell orders in the last 24 hours. Everything below that is 1s and 2s. This decline is really weird because there's just not enough supply to really say, yeah, okay, this should crash down to its 1 year low point. So that's why to me it feels risky. The Tengu makes most sense for me if you want to buy right now in the tactical cruiser market. The Proteus, bit of a gamble, but definitely makes sense at 120 and the cheapest to get in as well. The Legion and the Loki, more popular and thus harder to find that 1 year low point in those ships. But yeah, the Proteus is that exact same thing again. We're dipping down to 1 year low point on next to no supply. If 50 Protea would get bought, this stuff could go back to 157. But how the hell do you explain that this average price goes to this one low point when there is completely no supply? It's just really, is it really that bad of a ship? Is it that much out of the meta or out of the market's mind that something like this can happen? It feels like a great opportunity, but it also feels like maybe there's a couple hundred Proteas still waiting out there that will squash any opportunity for you to actually take the profits. So yeah, difficult decision to make for me personally. If I make a move, I kind of make the move on the Tengu. I think I train up to that. It's a good PvE platform as well. At least if I buy 2-3 Tengus, I can see myself use them more than the Proteus at the moment, which really doesn't feel that strong. So yeah, Tech 3 ship market, logical and nice looking in the destroyer market, really weird in the cruiser market. And then finally, we've got an extra product for this week coming in at 59.35. And it's like a half a request from someone from a couple of weeks ago. They asked me to take a look at the Tech 2 large free crystals. So let's take a look at that. Basically, the comment then said, you know what, it's kind of boring Tech 2 ammo, but I think it is interesting because if you want to step in for the first time in industry in Tech 2, then I think ammo makes just as much sense as going for Tech 1 ammo as your first start in industry in general in EVE Online. So let's take a look at these. Here is the Aurora chart, definitely trading below average, so we should have really cheap materials behind that at the moment, selling for 348,000 disc. Buyers are at 245. Clearly a lack of demand in the Aurora market right now is causing well below average prices, and still a pretty wide margin between sellers and buyers as well. Then for Gleam, a bit more volatility. That one is obviously a bit more popular, I think, than Aurora. High damage, of course, makes most sense, and right now it is selling for 480,000 disc. Buyers at 200,000. Look at that margin between sellers and buyers. Let's see if there's anything. Nope. Yep. That is kind of crazy. Right, more than 50% between sellers and buyers. This could be a niche market where you could make a move as just a trader trying to eke out a little bit of extra from your trade profits. Buy for 210, sell for 460, something like that. With the right volumes, you could stay under the radar with that. And that's kind of a crazy margin, right? More than double the price between sellers and buyers is very, very unusual. I'm not sure what it's gonna cost to produce Gleam, but it could be very high margin as well. It's something to look into. So I actually, honestly, this was not that bad a request, and it makes me want to look at some of the others as well. Here is Gleam XL, bit of a bump at the tail end, going for around 1.7 million for the sellers, 1.4 million. That's actually a little bit more normal. Then we've got Aurora XL, definitely a bit of a bump here, but that's probably an anomaly. 2 million, 2 million for the sellers, 815,000 for the buyers. Definitely worth looking into what the actual production costs of Aurora XL could be. I'll take a look at the mediums as well. It's only 2 apiece. Lovely December spike up to 600,000 disc. Normal price 200k. We're a bit above that, 244, 190. This actually feels like a normal, well supplied, maybe even slightly oversupplied market. Then we've got Gleam, really flat below average right now, 184,000, 152,000. You can see the lack of demand, but nothing too crazy. But what is noticeable, Gleam below average, really flat chart. That's actually the Aurora chart for the Ls. Kind of weird one as well. Aurora, I'm expecting this to be flat, and one new low point for a Gleam small, 35,000, 60,000 for the buyers. Yeah, definitely not too popular right now, but this stuff is like really easy to produce, right? Very easy to get very big volumes very quickly. It is only the small size, of course, so here we're not expecting too much. But honestly, that large Tech 2 frequency crystal market is interesting, especially the Gleam one, because the massive margin between buyers and sellers. Should really look at where the production cost is, and that opened us up to another potential with Aurora XL that is showing that same kind of crazy pattern between sellers and buyers that potentially could be very nice. So yeah, this was actually a really good suggestion in my opinion to take a look at the Tech 2 crystals, and this is only beam. I should maybe, we're gonna continue going for a bit over an hour already, but I want to take a look at that now as well. Here are the pulse crystal charts and margin conflagration around average, and then here we're talking 455, 382. That feels kind of normal. And then Scorch 400, 500,000. That's also kind of normal. Flat doing quite okay. Let's take a look at the extra larges here. Actually going a little bit below average. And here, 600,000 for the buyers, 1.3 million for the sellers. Scorch Excel, 1 million, that feels a bit more normal again. And then we'll end up with the mediums here. That's kind of normal, and that's a decent margin. Scorch M, not too much supply, actually at a high point. All right, stuff like this happens as well. Volatility in the Scorch. And then for small, I'm honestly expecting a much more stable chart. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, kind of a weird one actually. And then Scorch. Okay, well, a bit of a bump up to 100,000 is here as well. 37, 35, 54, 37. Not as good, except, so as I've said here, we get a sell opportunity in Scorch, and we've got a massive margin in, what was it, Conflagration XL. It could actually be interesting to look at these from a Tech 2 ship production perspective as well. I wonder what the production margins on these are. So yeah, don't feel bad about this one. Actually a very good suggestion. Tech 2 crystal ammo, really some interesting stuff there. Not really for traders, I would say, but potentially for producers. So thank you very much for that, and thank you all for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.